Now let me talk next about how a query is matched against things in the database. So we have our query like likes Brian what? Okay? And we're going to, let's say we don't have any bindings, so we don't know what is. We're going to match this against every assertion in the database. An assertion is something like likes Brian broccoli, right? So likes matches likes, Brian matches Brian. What, question mark what matches anything, so it matches broccoli. And so we make a new frame out of the old frame in which we've added a binding. So now we have a frame that says question mark what equals broccoli. And that would be one entry in a stream of frames. Okay? This kind of pattern matching is very, very straightforward and easy. Match is exactly like that. It goes through all the cases. Is this a word? And if so, is that a word? If one is and the other isn't, false. If they're both words, EQ them. Are they both, is one a list and the other not a list? False. Are they both lists? Equal the cars, equal the cooters. If both of those are true, it's all equal. Match works exactly the same way, except that in the query, this is something in the database, an assertion. In the query, you can have a variable, but not in the assertions in the database. When you say assert bang and you don't say rule, you can't have any variables in what you say. It's got to be a particular thing like likes Brian broccoli. Okay? What about rules? Here's where it gets interesting. So, in the database, I have rule. Grandparent, old, young. And that's true if and parent, old, middle. Parent, middle, young. Okay, that's what's in the database. And my query is grandparent who Brian. Okay? Okay, so when we make this query, first we go through all the assertions in the database. And let's say there are no assertions, no plain old assertions about anybody being anybody's grandparent. All the assertions are about parenthood. And we're supposed to deduce who the grandparents are. So we go through the rules and we find this rule. And the way evaluating a rule works is you match the conclusion of the rule, which confusingly is the first part of the rule, with the query. Okay? So if I do that, I say, okay, this matches. I get the bindings old 1 equals who, and young 1 equals Brian. So this is a frame that comes out of matching the query against the conclusion of a rule. But this kind of frame is something you can't get in the scheme evaluator. In the scheme evaluator, it's always a variable equals a value. And it's perfectly clear which is the variable and which is the value. And you're not allowed, if I say define x something or other, and then I say define y x, and you draw an environment diagram that has y bound to x instead of y bound to something or other, then you lose points, right? Variables aren't bound to variables in scheme. Variables are bound to values. And that really, really simplifies life. Here, we have a variable bound to a variable. Even more complicated things can happen, right? So if I have a rule that has $u dot $v, and in my query, it says something like it says foo dot $x. Now we're going to go through and make two bindings, from $u1 to foo, and from $v1 to $x. Okay, so all of that kind of thing can happen as you're matching up queries against rule conclusions. And this is because, the reason it's more complicated, in the assertion case, only one of the things you're matching is allowed to have variables in it. In the rule case, both of them can have variables. Okay? So now, think about, remember that one of the rules here is, I don't mean rule, I mean like one of the rules, is if you use the same variable name twice, it has to mean the same thing both times, right? So if later on in this evaluation process, we make another reference either to $old1 or to $who, so there'll be another binding someplace later on, and you have to be able to chase down more than one binding to get from a variable to its value. And maybe we don't know yet what its value is. So if that's the environment, we don't know what the value of old is, or what who is, rather. We know it's the same as some other variable, but we don't have an actual value for it. Okay. This much more complicated kind of matching, where you can have variables on both sides, is called unification. There's a whole section in the book about how unification works. There's a big chunk of the book about how the query system works altogether. But the part that I'd really like you to read is the part about the unification algorithm. Not because, God forbid, you're going to memorize it. It's really complicated. But I really would like you to get a feel for what it does and for how complicated it is.